This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Just like we invest in our physical health, our mental well-being deserves that same commitment. And many people shy away from therapy just due to the cost alone. Traditional sessions can range from $100 to well over $200 each session. And that's where BetterHelp can be a great option, offering a much more affordable solution by cutting those costs up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you're not just saving money, you're investing in a flexible, flat-fee service that allows you weekly sessions, making quality mental health care both accessible and convenient. And the thing about therapy is that it's not just for those dealing with significant trauma. It's also about guiding you in day-to-day decision-making, setting healthy boundaries, developing positive coping skills, and empowering you to be the best version of yourself. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy provider with over 30,000 therapists helping more than 5 million people worldwide. The convenience is unparalleled. You can start a session with just one click, easily fitting it into your busy schedule. And if you feel the need, you can switch therapists at any time. Here's your chance to make a substantial change in your life. Your well-being is truly worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/bestofyou today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/bestofyou. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Allison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Best of You podcast. Today, I couldn't be more honored and thrilled to share a really insightful conversation with someone who has helped me a ton on my own healing journey. It's Dr. Hillary McBride. Hillary is a psychologist, researcher, speaker, and author known for her compassionate, holistic approach to embodiment, spirituality, and healing trauma. Her groundbreaking work has been pivotal in helping countless individuals, including myself, as you'll hear me share with Hillary in today's episode, understand and heal in so many ways, but especially our relationships with our bodies. She's the author of several books, including The Wisdom of Your Body, Mother's Daughters, Embodied Image, and Practices for Embodied Living. And today we're going to talk about some of those themes, but we're also going to talk about her brand new book that's coming out this week. It's called Holy Hurt: Understanding Spiritual Trauma and the Process of Healing. I was so honored to play a role in this project. Hillary reached out to me and asked me to lend my voice to the conversation, both for the podcast series called Holy Hurt and this book that Hillary has written that courageously explores the intersection of spiritual and bodily trauma. In today's episode, we dive into just some fascinating insights on a couple of different topics. We're going to touch on how body image issues often reflect deeper spiritual and societal wounds and why simply focusing on body image isn't enough. We're going to talk about the profound impact of trauma on our nervous systems and why it leads to fragmentation, disconnection, and such a lingering sense of unsafety, and some of Hillary's insights on spiritual trauma and how it can be rooted in some of our beliefs and some of our early experiences. Hillary shares her personal and professional insights with extraordinary warmth and depth, helping us understand how reconnecting with our bodies and addressing spiritual wounds can lead to authentic, lasting healing. If you've ever felt disconnected from your body or even your spiritual identity, or simply long to find deeper integration and embodied wholeness, this episode is for you. I am thrilled to bring you my conversation with Dr. Hillary McBride. I'm so thrilled to just have you here. I can feel just so much anticipation in my body. And I will say, Hillary, before we dive into this topic of spiritual trauma, that I really am so excited to have this conversation with you in this beautiful book that I got to be a small part of, which is really meaningful to me.
A very important voice in.
It really meant a lot to me that you included me. Your work on embodiment has meant a lot to me in my own journey. And I would love for you to just share with my listeners who may not be familiar with you or who know you through that aspect of your work, just a little bit of your own kind of why that topic became so important to you to write about. And I think that was really the beginning of your public work, if I understand your body of work correctly.
Yeah, thank you for that invitation. I always like to anchor interviews like this in the personal because that's the place where all of our material comes from, as much as we like to say otherwise. We do this and do it with passion and commitment because it touches someplace in us. Actually, the work of spiritual trauma and embodiment are not so separate for me. And I can talk about that as I transition us maybe out of my story. But I came to the work of embodiment through my own profound experience of disembodiment. I came to understanding embodiment because I didn't actually know how to be in my body. And the background of that is I had an eating disorder for many years and had been, in the treatment circuit. And for anyone who's familiar with the eating disorder treatment circuit, it is often a series of revolving doors that people walk through wherein we are told as patients, can't trust yourself, can't trust your body, can't trust what you want for your body. Here are the guidelines. Here's something outside of you that's going to tell you how to treat yourself because you essentially can't be trusted with yourself. And I remember I had this one therapist who actually didn't talk about my eating disorder. We didn't talk about my weight. We didn't talk about my dietary concerns. We didn't talk about any of it. She really invited me into this consciousness raising space where I started to see that my hating of my body and my trying to make my body disappear was actually me being a good woman in my faith context and in my socio-political context. When we look at North America, when we look at so many of the religious contexts that many of your listeners come from, I think about how often we are told that when you hate your body, when you subdue your body, when you control your body, when you make your body nothing, you're seen as more valuable. You're seen as being good, like you're doing it right. And for me, that really started a conversation internally and externally with people around what are the other ways of being. And I ended up going to grad school and I was researching at that point body image. And I found in the body image literature, I was looking at how do we actually foster a healthy body image? Like if we know that there's a relationship between eating disorders and negative body image, could it be that if we have positive body image that it kind of inoculates us against eating disorders? Well, joke's on me because I found this whole body of research that said body image is actually insufficient as a way of understanding the full experience of being in yourself. Because if we just break down that term for a moment, image is only one dimension of the human experience, right? If I have a positive body image, that's great. I like how I look on the outside, but how I look is like what, 1% of who I am? I have a teacher, an embodiment teacher who says, you have 1,000,000 miles of unexplored territory inside of you. And so as long as we're thinking about body image, that's great if you like yourself, or that's like hard if you don't like how you look. But actually, that's not even really the thing that we need to be orienting towards if we're trying to repair our relationship with ourselves and move through the world in a way where we have integration, where we have presence, where we are connected to ourselves and others. So I found this research and it was Dr. Neva Paran, her work and the developmental theory of embodiment. It radically changed the direction of my research and the trajectory of my career. And as I started talking about embodiment and publishing about embodiment and really trying to research, like, what is this? What is it like? How does it show up across the lifespan? Because I looked at embodiment for aging women and in particular, perimenopause for my doctoral dissertation, embodiment in perimenopause, and what does it mean to become even more connected to yourself through that transition. What I found is that there is a story that people were carrying, the people who struggled the most to be in their bodies. And the story that they were carrying was one, my body is unsafe. And that was usually connected to trauma, physical trauma, sexual trauma, right? Experiences wherein the body felt like the scene of the crime. And the other one was my body is evil or sinful. And what I was starting to hear in this work for people is that believing that they could even get access to their body felt impossible because they had had years and years and years of people they trust and family members and scripture and prayer and any number of theological traditions and whatnot saying the only way you'll be close to God is if you get away from your body.
Yes, like the flesh, whatever we think of as the flesh gets conflated with body and it's bad. It's a Gnostic heresy. It is a heresy that the body is bad, but it is often the message in church cultures.
Exactly. And so what I found is that I couldn't really address embodiment without also addressing spiritual trauma. And I couldn't address spiritual trauma without also looking at the legacy that it has on our relationships with our bodies. And when we think about not just people who grow up in the church and are hearing these ideas over and over and over again, but when we look at the way that evangelical theology and that movement has shaped so much of the metaculture in America, I don't know if there's anybody, regardless of their religious ideas or their spiritual practices, who hasn't been touched by this pervasive fragmentation just at the level of mind-body, where we have started to see that bodies, really are subservient or secondary or at worst, right? Like evil and awful. That's just baked into our philosophy in westernized, white supremacist, like Eurocentric, post-colonization cultures. So it's here, whether we name it as such, it's here. And that's how I think these topics are related.
Yeah, you're so right. And Hillary, I want to share with you, I told you before we started, a part of me was going to want to just really do a back and forth. I promised the listener we're going to get to spiritual trauma. But just this morning, actually, as I think about you and that word embodiment and how you have brought that word, it's a positive. What I love about your work, its embodiment is a direction in which one can move. Just this morning, I have a very spiritualizing, sort of anxious part of me. And when I do parts work with this part of me, God comes into that part, lays a hand, and embodies this part of me. You have a body. It's about 15. You have a body. And I just have to sit with that. But I hear your voice, because you've even tried to take it to you are a body.
Right. What happens when we say that?
Right.
It's a little spooky, isn't it? Yeah.
And sometimes I will use, you've also talked about when it's really hard to understand our embodied on that deepest felt level, to take it to the third person. She, your body is a she. I can be kind towards something outside of me, and I can sort of begin to see my body as almost a part of me. She is a good body. Anyway, you've discussed this and you've brought this positive trajectory toward where can I move toward versus just what is not working. So I just wanted to share that with you. Your language of that, I think, is so powerful. And I'm so grateful to you for that, for giving us that vocabulary.
Yes. I love knowing how it's living inside of you and just the wrestle and the tension and the possibility that it could be more than just a thing, that our body could be a someone, that it could be an aliveness, and it could be actually our aliveness. I know that that can be a little tricky for some people to step into that. That feels a little scary sometimes, because if I am my body, then everything that happened to my body happened to me, and I have to associate to that. So that can be a tricky one for folks sometimes. But I am just appreciating knowing more about how that lives in you. It feels so good.
And the goodness. And it's scary to be a body in this world, as a woman, as a sensitive person. And also, it is our holy invitation in this healing process that it is, in fact, good. And so with that in mind, I do want to segue, Hillary, you speak so beautifully and in such a gentle way about the reality of trauma and women's experiences. I'd love to start with trauma, how it lives in the body, and then move into spiritual trauma.
Yeah.
It's a huge question.
It's a huge question. Well, there's a scholar named Michelle Panchuk whose work through this writing I've become really familiar with. I hope to meet her. I learned from her from afar at this point. But in one of her academic papers, she calls trauma multiply ambiguous. And what she means by that is we use the word trauma to mean so many things. We use it to mean the thing that happened. We also use it to mean the way that what happened and the impact of it lives on in us. Sometimes we use it to talk about the big things that are insufferable. Sometimes we use it colloquially to talk about things that were hard. We can talk about trauma at the level of the individual nervous system as well as systemically. And so if I'm thinking about all of those things at once, I come back to 2 or 3 main points. The first one would be fragmentation. And fragmentation being this kind of split or schism within ourselves or between us and others, that at the point of overwhelm, which is the second word that often we use related to trauma, when something is too much for our nervous system to process or make sense of it, it feels like such a threat to our ability to be, right? To just be, to be connected, to have our needs met, to whatever it is, to survive, that our nervous system tips over into this place of not processing, of not integrating, of not holding sensation in mind at the same time, of not storing memory with a timestamp. It kind of lives on in perpetuity inside of us. And our nervous system is responding as if the thing is still happening because it doesn't have that sequencing of feeling over, right? That's part of our body's way of keeping us alive, is saying, I'm going to be at the ready because this is not done and I need to keep protecting you through dissociation, through terror, through flashbacks, through whatever it is, through this sense of like losing contact with the sense of safety in the here and now. And when we think about that word fragmentation, I think it helps us hit to the multiple levels of how we can experience trauma, because I would say that trauma, yes, on a neuroanatomical level, there is a split that happens. We call it, here's the language, the corticothalamic uncoupling. Cortex, thalamus, 2 parts of our brain that normally are talking, integrating sensation, presence, emotion, memory, ideas, meaning making, time. They stop talking to each other. And there's an inability for us to like complete a response or get through to the other side of something. But we can also look at fragmentation in terms of me and you, or me and the world, or me and God, or me and my meaning making system, that when something is so big that it fractures something inside of us, like it shatters would be another word I would use instead of fragmentation, is shattering. That touches every part of our life. That touches all the ways we relate to other people. All it takes is a survivor of a kind of relational trauma to know our bodies are really good at generalizing. And it's not just the person who hurt us that feels scary. It can also be any other person, right? So that's what I mean when I say there is a shattering. When previously people might have been good and trustworthy, because of the trauma, it's not just that person who hurt me that I can't trust, but it's any other person who could hurt me.
I want to talk about something that we all need, but often take for granted. That's clean drinking water. Like many of you, I'm always on the lookout for ways to ensure my family and I are drinking the healthiest water possible. Did you know that 3 out of 4 homes in America have harmful contaminants in their tap water? That's why I switched to AquaTrue. AquaTrue water purifiers use a sophisticated 4-stage reverse osmosis process that requires no installation. I love that it just sits right on the countertop. It's designed to remove more than 84 of the most harmful contaminants, including PFAs, also known as forever chemicals, which are found in almost 45% of U.S. tap water. I love how the AquaTrue purifier is so easy to use and maintain. The filters last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, which means less hassle and more savings. Plus, it's portable. I can take it anywhere, which makes it perfect for apartments or even college dorm rooms. And let me just say, the water tastes fantastic. It's not just filtered, it's purified. AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and even makes a great gift. Today, my listeners receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com, that's AQUATRU.com, and enter code BESTOFYOU at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use promo code BESTOFYOU. Prioritize sleep, prioritize you, because great days start with better nights. If you're ready to upgrade your sleep, look no further than Cozy Earth. Their bamboo sheet set is the softest, coolest, most luxurious bedding you'll ever own. It's crafted to restore, refresh, and revitalize you night after night. And I absolutely love Cozy Earth's bamboo pajamas. They're lightweight, breathable, and they are so buttery soft. They are one of the most comfortable pajama sets I've ever owned. Honestly, I wish I could just wear them all day long. Cozy Earth products are not only designed with luxury in mind, but they're built to last. Cozy Earth offers a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty on every bedding product. Their commitment to quality and responsible production means you can enjoy unparalleled comfort for years to come. Prioritize sleep, prioritize you. Visit CozyEarth.com and use my exclusive code BESTOFYOU for 40% off best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. And if you get a post-purchase survey, let them know you heard about Cozy Earth right here. Sleep better with Cozy Earth. When you describe it that way, what's happening literally in the body, we cannot help that. We can't will ourselves to get those parts of our brains to reconnect. That's not a willpower thing. That's not a what's wrong with me, which is often where we go to self-shame. We're aware I had this bad experience at this one place. Why do I still feel it? Anytime I hear these particular words, even though I might know that these particular words are not, in fact, in this setting, harmful to me, right? I love how you describe the literal fragmentation there.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're setting me up really nicely to talk about the spiritual trauma piece of this, which I hope I can add that in. The way that I understand spirituality is that spirituality is an inborn human desire for meaning making, for connection, for a sense of trying to pursue connection. It's this inborn human natural desire for us to discover, to seek purpose, to feel connected to ourselves and others, and ultimately to God. And so when you think about the spirituality is not just what we practice, those are spiritual practices. That's how we enact our desire to connect. Or religion, which is a culture of how we as a group of people say, hey, we're going to practice answering these big questions.
Organize. Yep.
Exactly. Spirituality is an inborn drive for connection. That's kind of the most simple way of describing it. So let's go back to trauma for a second. Shattering and fragmentation. If we hold those two side by side, I don't think that there's any trauma that isn't also spiritual trauma. Because trauma at its very core is getting in the way of connection within me, between us, and in the big picture, right? There's no way to navigate through trauma without there being some sort of shattering. And so if what gets shattered is that sense of I can move towards others for help, or I can trust my body, or I believe that God is here with me, even though it's hard, I just don't understand how any trauma at its very root is not also spiritual in nature.
So this is exactly what I wanted to ask you. Because religious trauma might have a distinct thing as it happens within an institution. But that's what I wanted to ask you about spiritual trauma. Where I come across it, I think a little bit about attachment theory. If we think about, and I was really informed by Anna Maria Rizzuto, Birth of a Living God, and how our earliest experiences of mother love, father love, that attachment, that safety, maps onto and shapes and influences our experience of God. And I know that's a simplification of what you're saying, but that is sort of an example of wherever there is trauma or a wound or a fragmentation to the soul, it permeates all of our relational connectivity, including our relationship with God, but also our relationship with other people. So that's a different way, but that's how I've thought about it.
Yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense. And I think we can even simplify it further, which I think, or maybe you tell me if it's simplifying or complexifying, that our brain-body system is an association making system, which means that our brain-body system is always looking for connections between things. And it's pairing things, especially things that are threatening and dangerous. So, for example, it doesn't take long to burn your hand on the stove before you realize you got to be careful around the stove, that when the element is red, it's hot. Or you're walking in a dark alley. If you feel someone's footsteps behind you and you don't know what's going to happen next, it would make a lot of sense if the next time you're in a dark alley that you're going to be on the lookout and you're going to be listening for footsteps and you're going to be watching and wondering, where's the exit? How do I get out? Who's around? So our brain is constantly making associations, good ones, right? Helpful ones. This is part of our survival. And if you think about like what you're saying about early attachment experiences where we learn daddy's unsafe, mommy's unsafe, daddy hurts me, mommy hurts me, whatever the story is. And then you go into a church where people are saying, God is like your father, God is like your mother. Your brain is saying, I'm going to take this impression that I've made over here and transfer it over here. I don't even think we have to talk about it from a symbolic lens. I think we can say quite literally the injuries that we have that are encoded related to father, of course, are going to be pulled up when someone says God is father. It like makes perfect sense from a neurobiological perspective. So I'm glad that you brought it up. I think we have multiple ways of understanding that that's just how brains work. That's true.
You say it so well. And then I just think to myself, and then the self-shame comes in. Because what's wrong with me that I think God is mean? Or what's wrong with me that I have a fight-flight response when people are talking about God the Father, as opposed to my brain is making an association that it is actually, in fact, for my survival.
Yeah. So when you talk about that, I mean, it's almost like ubiquitous that people have that response, what's wrong with me? And I would say, again, that happens in religious spaces and culture at large. There is something that in the trauma literature, and in particular the religious trauma literature, that we call hermeneutic injustice. And the idea is that frameworks for meaning making and understanding what is happening inside of us are often deliberately kept from people, such that they can't then know how to make sense of what is happening inside of them, which is a really useful tool to get people to feel shame and blame and like they need to do more of the things that return them to the place where the injury happens. There's this kind of like cycle of abuse that can happen where you keep people in the dark, uninformed about their bodies, about trauma, about healthy systems, about healthy family dynamics, about power and control, about abuse, right? If you keep people in the dark about that and you tell them everything happens for a reason, and you tell them that their bodies are bad and anytime their body is afraid, it's because they're sinning, then it's really easy for people to disavow the messages that bodies give them that say, this does not feel safe. And we hate the body instead of thinking critically about the context that's making us feel unsafe. So what you're saying is just like at the very core of a lot of these normative spiritual trauma experiences for people where they blame themselves because they've been taught to blame themselves without being given the opportunity to look and ask, well, why do I feel so much shame? Why do I feel so scared? Why is that the go-to inside of me? And maybe it's not because I'm bad. Maybe it's because the context I was in was harmful to me, or that relationship or that leader or that idea injured me in some way.
You say this when you introduce the Holy Hurt podcast. You ask this series of really powerful questions that I think is a little bit of what you're saying there. It's so good. How do you point to something specific that was so regularly occurring that it was actually woven into the fabric of your development? How do you know what was literally woven in to your fabric of development? How can you name what was wounding when the source of the trauma causes you to sever the knowing that a wound existed in the first place? So hence we arrive at adulthood with all of this stuff going on inside of us without the tools to think critically, to your point, to evaluate critically the context. Before we get into, so what do we do? How do we unravel this? How do we begin to heal? I want to get there, but I want to circle back to this idea of spiritual trauma. I think many people listening, when they see those words, are thinking to some degree, it's a trauma that relates to my prayer life. It's a trauma that relates to my experience of church. It's a trauma that relates to my relationship with God. In your experience as a clinician, as a researcher, how do many people, what is their lived experience of what we're calling spiritual trauma?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, because I imagine we could collaboratively make quite a list for people. But I would say it spans everything from clergy sexual abuse, all the way to being spanked, which we know in Canada, it is illegal. It's a form of child abuse. And being told, this is because God loves you. This is because I love you. right? So the things that many of us just considered that this is how we raise kids, right? This is just normal parenthood. My parents are doing this because they love me and because someone at the church told them to. I think that there's a whole spectrum that includes the really obvious things that have major religious connotations, all the way to the things that are seemingly a-religious in a way because they're just happening in our homes. But I think that probably the most common hallmark of spiritual trauma, I mean, I'd be curious to know what you have to say about this. I believe it is people being told that they are bad to their core. You are bad. And that's why you need Jesus. You're actually fundamentally bad. Like for people to be told in a very confusing way that sounds loving and sounds like this is the right way and we're celebrating you. I think I could boil it down to this. Spiritual trauma is believing it is so, so good to believe you are so, so bad.
That's well put. And there is an embodied component to that. There's a split, right? I am bad. And I use this word. I think my listeners know what I mean by this word. I also know this word can be very triggering. I don't think it's biblical.
I agree with you.
Because this idea that we have to hate ourselves to know God's love, it makes no sense. And so I like to emphasize the original goodness. Yes, we are imperfect. Sin is so misunderstood. So I'm with you on that. And Hillary, you said that so well that just makes no psychological sense.
It doesn't. And let's just think about in any other context, like if I think of my secular psychologist friends, if they came to me with a case and they said, oh my gosh, I'm hearing from this patient that as a child, they were told, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. And here are all the things you have to do. Under no circumstances would we question that's abuse. Like the clinical guidelines are so clear that that's extremely damaging to a person's sense of self. It's the shattering that we were talking about earlier. And yet when we put it in a spiritual context and people say, oh, but this is how we raise your children right. This is how you actually get close to God. It is really messy because people feel a sense of needing to buy into that belief as a means of connecting to their community, which is a fundamental human need for survival as well, to be close, to be connected, to belong. And we will do any number of things to belong to people. And I think there's no fault to us about that, right? We need community, but it's wild how normal these things can sound when it seems like everyone around us believes them too.
I love also how you're painting the spectrum all the way from the more obvious clergy sexual abuse, which is horrific, and I'm so glad you're naming it, to cultures of abuse where there's narcissism. Our friend Chuck DeGroat writes so well about narcissism. And two, what you're almost describing here, what we're talking about here, where otherwise really loving parents who have inherited or ingested, maybe even in a well-meaning way, a really bad theology that unintentionally, perhaps even, they've tried to turn themselves inside out. That spectrum of it's in the air that we breathe in many ways.
Yeah. And I think that can be scary for some of us who are parents. You know, we're listening to this thinking, I don't want to change my view of my parents. They did some of these things. What do I do? It can be really scary to open the box on what normal experiences did I have or did I create for someone that were inherently spiritually traumatic. What I like to remind myself is you cannot heal something that you pretend does not exist. Right. So if we are thinking about moving towards integration, the way towards the wholeness that we're after is not to pretend that didn't happen. But I think that also it's important for us to recognize on some level that trauma in its ubiquity and its kind of normativity, like it's around us and in us. And Gabor Mate writes about this exquisitely, that there's actually something about us being able to see the scale and the scope of it that can move us towards reorganizing our systems, that can move us towards seeing like, whoa, no wonder things are awry and we all are fragmented from each other and we use the earth and our capitalist society is more interested in money than preserving relationship. Like, oh my gosh, trauma is baked into the foundation of the way that we exist. And I would argue that for me, my journey of spiritual trauma healing has included me looking at how have I perpetuated it, which takes a really, really clear sense of knowing I am good to be able to do that. There's this interesting thing there, right? Like when I am connected to the truth of who I am, that I am loved and good, then I don't have to put blinders up to how I've hurt other people. And so it actually is part of the healing, not just inside of me, but between us, for us to look at, ooh, how deep does this go?
It's the paradox. Shame keeps us fragmented. The more we understand our belovedness and the goodness with which God, again, I often think is a miracle in light of all of the toxicity, that we still catch glimpses of this being who is love and who does call us good and beloved and delighted in, right? It's actually a miracle in many ways that triumphs through all of the clutter that so many of us inherited. I want to also just touch on this for the listener. You do such a beautiful job of validating the different journeys that folks find themselves on when they begin to do this work of naming, oh, this has been toxic for me. Are you tired of searching for a skincare product that actually delivers on its promises? I've been there, trying product after product labeled as clean or non-toxic, only to find hidden ingredients or zero results. That's why I'm thrilled to share Purity Woods with you. Their mission is simple: to provide the cleanest and most effective healthy aging products on the market. Their products are USDA certified organic, non-GMO, free of artificial additives, parabens, and toxic preservatives, and they're completely cruelty-free. Their age-defying Dream Cream is a game changer. With revolutionary maple leaf extract and over 25 potent ingredients, it helps reduce fine lines, wrinkles, and age spots while supporting collagen and elastin production, all without irritation or drying. Turn back time on the appearance of your skin with Purity Woods Age-Defying Dream Cream. Right now, Purity Woods is offering 17% off site-wide, and we have an exclusive additional 10% discount for our listeners. That's a total savings of 27%. Go to puritywoods.com/bestofyou or enter code bestofyou at checkout for an additional 10% off your first order. That's PURITYWOODS.com and enter code bestofyou for a total of 27% off your first order. Did you know millions of Americans grind or clench their teeth at night, and most have no idea they're doing it? If you wake up with jaw pain or headaches, there's a good chance you're grinding in your sleep. It's often stress-related and can lead to serious dental damage like worn enamel, cracked teeth, and major dental bills. And that's where Remy comes in. Remy makes professional quality mouth guards without the $500 to $800 dentist price tag. They send you an at-home impression kit. You make molds of your teeth, send them back, and Remy's team creates a custom fit guard that's actually comfortable to wear. Most people forget they're even wearing it. And with a 45-night satisfaction guarantee, you can try it risk-free and finally give your teeth and your jaw a break. Remy is for anyone dealing with nighttime grinding, clenching, or jaw pain who wants an affordable solution to protect their smile and say goodnight to jaw pain and headaches. Head to shopremy.com/bestofyou and use code bestofyou to save up to 50%. That's 50% off at shopremy.com/bestofyou with code bestofyou. Give your teeth a break without breaking the bank with Remy. Thank you, Remy, for sponsoring this episode.
There are some people, like you said, who need to get as far away as they possibly can from anything that signals this is like what hurt me, of course. And that's really, really hard to do when you've been told that your perpetrator is omnipresent. That's really, really hard to do when you've been told that the abuser, the person who is making this all happen, is God and God is everywhere. So I just want to acknowledge the complexity of that. With spiritual trauma is so hard for some people to move around the world in, because where isn't God, as they've been told? So there's the people who need to get as far away from it as possible, to, like you said, the people who are in this tension of needing to disorganize and reorganize their meaning-making systems, their relationship to spirituality. And then I would say that there's still some people on this other end of the spectrum who their religious tradition and their spiritual practices will be the thing that helps them endure and navigate and heal and mend. But it's really, really hard to do that if you believe that God wants you to suffer, that God wants you to be disconnected from your body, that God wants you to, et cetera. So there's some tensions there that people need to work out. But I would say that that spectrum is so important to acknowledge, because I think that for some people who are in one place and have found one location of orienting to spirituality as the place where they've done their healing, it's so easy for us to ascribe to other people that it needs to look the same. And I actually think that part of an integration on a we level is our ability to tolerate difference and still see value and belonging. So for me to say, stay in the church, if that is what matters to you and that is helping you heal the wounds, I am so glad you are healing those wounds, as well as the person who's in the church looking at the person who's running, saying, I am so glad you're getting away from what feels scary. The place you were told you had to stay put and sit down and be good. You get out, you run as fast and far as you can, and you have me with you, my hand at your back every step of the way. And I think if we can do that for each other, we actually begin to mend on a systemic level the spiritual injuries that fragment us from each other.
I love that. I feel that in my body when you say that. I feel like some of the divisiveness of how we're supposed to heal breaks my heart as much because it is such a personal journey for folks. And I have friends and family members who, to your point, have had to run their only way to salvage a semblance of the wonder. And what we think of as love and goodness and beauty is to disassociate from anything that smacks of. I want to quote you, Hillary, because I think this is one of the more powerful quotes. Spiritual trauma is someone handing you an inner critic and telling you it's the voice of God. And that's what we're talking about when we have to disentangle from that. It may look like throwing the baby out with the bathwater to some degree because it's so hard to disentangle. So let's talk about healing with this idea that it will look different for everybody, but this idea that on some level we've associated shame and fragmentation and pain and self-doubt and self-hatred with the voice of God. And we begin to realize this. This is not, in fact, God. How would you invite the listener to begin the process of healing?
Well, first of all, I think that coming back to safety in the body could be the place people start. It might be the last place people go because being in a body has been so difficult for them. But I think even levels of skill around tolerating discomfort, being able to stay with sensation in the body long enough that we can get to the other side of hard questions and hard conversations allows us to then be able to tolerate the discomfort of being able to say, what if that's not who God is? That was the story about God I was told, and that story is wrong. I mean, there's a great unraveling that happens on the other side of that, and it can feel like a free fall into nothing. Well, if that's a story, how do I trust any other story? And which story is true? And what do I do? And do I decide, or does someone else decide? And who outside of me is going to tell me what to do? There is like an incredible visceral terror and dis-ease that people feel as they start to pull apart their meaning-making structure. And so I think, again, this is my embodiment lens. If we can stay with the body and learn how to be with sensation and learn how to talk to our body, thank you for telling me this is a scary question. And I'm realizing, body, that this is a lot for us to be with. You're telling me I need to move my body because there's a lot of energy here. That allows us to hang with some of those questions over time and learn to be in the not knowing for a season. So I would say that, being with the body is elemental for recovery. I would also say that finding new connections and spaces for belonging is essential too, because most of us have these experiences either baked in to our social networks. If you think about being in a church and being raised in that church, and it's where you go 5 times a week, and it's your friends, and it's your youth group, and it's your babysitter, and it's your everybody's there, it's really hard to move away from that meaning-making system and the beliefs and the ideas if it's also the way we get belonging, which, as I said earlier, is our fundamental need. So if we can find access to connection with people, whether it's through therapy or support groups or peer groups or extending like our relationships to people outside of that worldview, then we can begin to think critically. And this is true, like, to bring us back to body image. How do we change our relationship to our bodies when the world around us is saying, hate them, it's good, make them disappear, alter them, cut them up, chop them off, right? Do all sorts of things. If we have a subgroup that we identify with who thinks critically about what media is doing and body narratives, then even if we live in this big meta system that's saying bodies are bad, we actually can protect and preserve our relationship with ourselves because we have relationships with others who reinforce different ways of thinking about ourselves. And so that's true for body relationship and spiritual remaking.
The antidote to the fragmentation is connection to body, connection to others. I might also say connection to nature. That's been a source for me of embodiment, but that's really beautiful. Hillary, and you take it right out of the abstract. Just, it's so earthy.
You said earthy right after you were talking about connection to nature. And I just want to highlight that for a moment, because I think part of the question of how have I perpetuated spiritual trauma or how have I benefited from others' spiritual trauma takes us back to colonization and fragmentation of the land. Between us and the land, the way that we use land as a thing instead of aliveness that is supporting our aliveness. And it's really been my indigenous friends and community that have taught me trauma didn't really exist until colonization happened, because no one was ever separated from themselves. No one was ever separated from the land. No one was ever separated from their community and their family. We all lived together. We all had practices. We were all in relationship with medicines and land and ceremony. And that for me was a huge wake-up call that trauma is a socially, relationally mediated process, that there's always an element of relationship that helps us heal and some sort of connection that gets fractured at the heart of trauma. And I think that, again, baked into the fabric of our society is a fracture with the land. The fact that, many of us don't even think of the land as another parent who can hold us. The fact that we don't think about land as a source of medicine and communication and aliveness and vibrancy. And you could say, a primary incarnation, as some theologians would say, like the place where we actually see God's self revealed. That the fact we don't even think about that, or the fact that we just don't even think about our bodies, like those are symptoms of these downstream effects of trauma that is happening at a major systemic level for us that we don't even know about. I'm just very grateful you added land in there.
Yeah, I grew up at a base of a mountain, and that mountain feels very much like an attachment figure to me. I tend to attribute that to Creator, right? To God. It's almost like I think about it like top down and bottom up approaches in psychology to healing.
Yes, yes. That's
right?
exactly, yeah, you got it.
Because top down is I go to God and then I appreciate nature, which that can be very common. And almost what you're saying is go to nature or go to your body. Start there.
Yeah.
And again, using my words, I don't have an agenda with this. It will sound like I do. That will bring us into relationship with the author of all things good and beautiful and loving and kind. That's beautiful.
I've never put that language on it in terms of this material. So thank you for that insight. That so resonates with my work. We heal in a bottom-up way. So of course we would heal from spiritual trauma in a bottom-up way too.
Just as we close, Hillary, I shared about Holy Herd in the introduction, but I'd love to hear your heart behind it more personally, and also just what you're doing in this space to help folks who have been harmed.
So I want to tell a brief story. It's not really a story, I guess, but it's more of like my positionality that as a trauma therapist, some people think about my work as being extremely heavy and painful and exhausting. And yet what I know is at the end of the day, I am more connected to a source of hope inside of me, not only because I see people mend and remake themselves, but because I see people being brave enough to look at where it hurts and believe there is something of value there. And when I think about this project, it is heavy material, right? It is not easy to walk into and not easy for people to walk into themselves. But I ultimately think that there is a message of hope in this because, as I said earlier, we can't mend injuries that we pretend aren't there. And for us to be able to move towards where it hurts is ultimately us moving towards the wholeness that's on the other side. And I mean that for people who are, a million miles away from church doors. Great, wonderful. Look at what it took for you to have to run so far. Like, absolutely great. And I also mean that for people who are in the church, who are new to this conversation, who feel scared and overwhelmed by looking at it. What does that mean? Does it mean that I am violating my commitment to these theological positions or my community? Can I even look at this? And what I want to say to you is I think this is a love letter to the church. I think that this work around Holy Hurt is a love letter to religion, because it's a way of saying, hey, if we are not considering the injuries, then we are missing the place where we need to bring love the most. If we are missing the injuries, we're not seeing how we are perpetuating the injuries. I mean, there's such a beautiful example we can think of in scripture of Jesus risen from the dead saying, hey, look at the wounds, look at them. Do not look away from the injuries. And there, to me, feels like an invocation to say, like, if we're going to take those of us inside the church, if we're going to take our faith seriously, we actually need to see there as being something prophetic about the injuries. So whether you're in the church or out of the church, like, that's actually not what this is about. My primary orientation in writing this was tell stories that help survivors, for sure. But underneath that, gosh, if we are not changing things at a systems level, we're just going to have more and more and more people injured by these patterns that continue, and we can do it differently. So wherever you find yourself, I hope that there's something in this book for you.
That's beautiful. I guess I just want to personally thank you again, not just for your work in embodiment, but I think what you're doing here is just so necessary and so needed. And you speak with such wisdom. You have such a unique blend of gentleness and wisdom and truth telling. 'Cause that's what you're talking about, is telling the fullness of truth. I'm just so grateful that you put the work into this. It's not easy work.
Oh, thank you so much. It's not easy work, and I'm so grateful to not do it alone. And I couldn't have written this book. It would have been incomplete without your voice and the pieces that you added to it. So thank you for contributing. And for folks who are listening to our podcast episode, Allison's contribution to the book is so rich.
I think there needs to be a very large table of us trying to figure this out. It is not solo work. We need lots of different voices, lots and lots and lots and lots of different voices. Yeah. And I think that's what I feel is I'm just so grateful to have been one voice among a chorus of very different voices trying to untangle some of these knots.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you so much, Hillary, for being here, and just so grateful for you.
I loved it. I will, when my head hits the pillow at the end of the night, I'll think about this conversation and what it felt like to be in the energy of this work with you.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.
You know, over time, life can get you down. Discouragement starts to creep in, and eventually we just stop letting ourselves hope for more. We say things like, I'll believe it when I see it, and don't get your hopes up. Sounds like good grown-up advice, right? Actually, it's not. Hey, I'm Christy Wright, #1 national best-selling author, speaker, business coach, and mom of 3. Oh, and I have a podcast called Get Your Hopes Up, which is what I want to tell you about. Romans 15:13 says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by power of the Holy Spirit." And that is exactly what my show is about. Whether I'm telling one of my latest crazy God stories or giving you practical advice to live out your faith, I love hanging out with you every Monday to help you get to know God, get closer to him, and get your hopes up again. Listen to Get Your Hopes Up wherever you get your podcasts, and you can learn more at getyourhopesup.com. That's getyourhopesup.com.
Let's be real, talking about intimacy can be awkward, even with your spouse, but it doesn't have to be. We are Alana, Kyle, and Tira, hosts of the Kingdom Sexuality Podcast, and we're all about keeping it real and helping you add some spice and deeper connection into your marriage. specifically when it comes to what happens in the bedroom.
We don't shy away from the tough conversations that often get missed in Christian circles. With us, you'll get laughs, tips, fresh ideas, and challenges to strengthen your relationship and bring it to the next level.
Because let's face it, navigating intimacy as a Christian can be confusing, and finding safe, wholesome resources can be tough. So, subscribe now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us each week on the Kingdom Sexuality Podcast.